Okay, so we are looking at our performance assessments today. So this is going to be day 10. So we're going to go PFT 101, day essentials and fitness assessments. I'm in an extra singy mood today, and I don't know why. This is going to be day 10, which is still PowerPoint 5, part 4, performance assessments. All right, so performance assessments, these are kind of like the really fun ones. This is actually a lot of what I want to do, just to kind of blow off some steam on when we get together in person, is actually do like a lot of the day will kind of be spent doing performance assessments, even though arguably they are one of the least important type of assessments that we're going to do, like in terms of categories at least. Not that they are not important, it's just that, you know, they don't really tell us objective data on what type of exercises we need to choose or anything like that. When it comes to program design, your performance assessments, I mean, they give you a little bit of structure, but like they are really just like you versus future you. That's the main concept here, right? Like performance assessments are just like, you know, are you improving? So if you're trying to get faster at your sprints, for instance, yeah, you would time like how fast you run, maybe like a 40-meter dash. And so like then you would design a program that is designed to increase your sprint speed. And in 4 to 6 weeks, you would test, hey, did my sprint speed get faster? So it's not that performance assessments are not going to tell you what exercises to perform. It's just that, you know, they aren't necessarily like, they're not tied directly to overactive, underactive muscles the same way that, your traditional assessments, like, you know, an overhead squat, when we see somebody's knees cave in, you know that caving in motion is being caused by something. But what's really cool about these is these are sometimes just really fun assessments that don't take all that much time, that give your client something kind of fun to strive for. Like I really like to use these assessments. Like the two that are in your textbook are going to be the Davies test and the Sharks skill test. And those are just like really fun assessments that your client like tries to get kind of better at, because especially the Shark skill test, which is, you know, you standing in a box trying to like balance as you jump from like box to box, like effectively. That's kind of a goofy, fun thing that your client can kind of see improvement on slowly over time. I've had like a lot of times that's like when it comes to reassessing clients, that's one of my clients' like favorite reassessments, just because it's kind of fun. And like, it's always interesting to see like, oh, did I beat my record? You know? So performance assessments, we're going to kind of put these in their own category here. So, so performance assessments are an example of objective data, right? But they are used for clients trying to improve athletic performance. And then underneath it, we'll kind of put a note here. There is no standard table for how well a client should perform in these assessments, but it's an excellent way to see improvement. Right? So basically, again, there's no standard table. Like, you know, we know based on your age, after we give you like a 3-minute step test, which is the same amount of stress for everybody across the board, we know how quickly your heart rate ideally should recover. We know what a good VO2 max score to kind of aim for is, you know, what categories to put you in. You know, information like that's going to tell me how intense I can be when it comes to your cardio. You know, we know what a good overhead squat looks like. Information like that tells me, you know, what muscles to stretch and what muscles to strengthen. Performance assessments are a great way to just kind of, you know, keep your client motivated by seeing like slow improvement over time. So the two big ones that you are going to see that are in your regular textbook are going to be the Davies test and the Sharks skill test. So the first one, the Davies test, is, and this is the sentence you'll want to kind of have in your head, because this is how they, this is how they often word it, but is a performance assessment designed to assess upper body, well, I guess upper extremity, agility and stabilization. Okay. So the real big one here actually is agility. That's often the word that they'll kind of skip straight to. Remember that, like, if you go back to our program design classes, you'll remember that you've got a speed, agility, and quickness. Agility is how well you change directions, right? So the Davies test is a really good example of that directional change. Basically what it is you're going to get into a push-up position with your hands marked 36 inches apart. So what you'll have is you'll have two marks on the floor, 36 inches apart. Now, you can totally modify that if you want to. Like, it doesn't have to be 36 inches. It's just 36 in the standard version. So that's the number I want you guys to know. But obviously, if you do it at 24 inches, you could always just write that in your assessment and just do that for your client in the future. But basically, they're in that push-up position with hands like so, and they're going to reach across, taking one hand up off the floor, touching their other hand, putting it back on the marker, and then reaching over and touching with the opposite. And they're going to do as many touches as they can in 15 seconds time. So you're just going to count the number of touches that they get in 15 seconds. And so the more upper extremity stability they have, and the more agility that they have, the faster they're going to be able to get through that assessment. So it's a really kind of a fun one. One that I always look forward to like doing with the class. But it may not be suitable for individuals who lack shoulder stability. That is an important thing to remember. Obviously, this assessment is not for everyone. If your client has like shoulder impingement, if you did your overhead squat and you notice that they have arms falling forward really severely, they have a forward head posture and really elevated shoulders, you're gonna want to be pretty cautious with this. This may not be the most appropriate assessment for your client. So that's the Davies test, right? It's a performance assessment for upper agility extremities, upper extremities, upper body agility. So our position, what you're gonna wanna have your client do is begin by placing two pieces of tape 36 inches apart on the floor. By the way, your standard tiles that you'll normally find in most businesses are like 12-inch by 12-inch tiles. So you can also just like mark those, 3 of those in terms of length. Begin. And then you're going to position your client with their arms on both of those, right? So position your client in a push-up position with one hand on each piece of tape and feet together. That feet together part's really important because what that does is, if you think of like your points of contact that are on the ground, right, your arms are kind of wide and it comes together in a V into one like central point. That makes more instability as you tilt to each side. So because there's only like one point of contact that's really narrow in the center with your feet together, it enhances like how much stabilization is used during the assessment. So if you do want to make the assessment harder, if you do want to make the assessment easier, what you can do is you can widen the feet out, but you're going to need to measure like how far apart your client's feet are wide. And you're going to want to mark that down in order to be able to recreate that position later. That's actually not necessarily a bad way to do things. Like I've had clients, I guess actually I've only had this one time. One client that I definitely skipped the Davies assessment for was like a client who did have like some pretty bad upper body posture. Wasn't like a super older dude or anything. Like he was in his probably mid 40s, not really that, out of shape, but he did have like really bad posture. He had like, he had a desk job. He worked, he was like what's the word, a paralegal. And so like just a lot of time spent like in a hunched over position, like dealing with paperwork and things like that all day. So, he didn't have the greatest like upper body posture, but he had seen me work with my other clients and we've been working together for a while. And he was like, hey, what's that assessment that you do with like the hands reaching over and touching? And I was like, oh, it's an upper body agility thing. And he was getting like back into boxing. Like he had done like some boxing when he was younger and kind of fell out of it. And so like I was working with his like boxing trainer who was also doing some cardio for him and stuff. And so he was like, well, I'm doing all this like boxing stuff now. I'd like to kind of work on my upper body agility. And I was like, oh, okay, well, hey, like let's put you through the Davies test. And so went downstairs and did it. And at first, like he really kind of struggled with it. So what I had him do was I had him start, with his hands 36 inches apart, and then I had him do his feet 18 inches apart. So like I measured both of those out, which was a modification to how the test normally is performed, but I always performed it with like that with him. And then he got really good at it slowly over time. Like, we checked in like, we used it as like a short-term goal. We used it for, what was it, like probably 6 months worth of time. We were taking it really seriously. It was like the main thing we were working on, was just getting better at the Davies test. And so, as he got better and better and better at it, I was like, all right, well, let's upgrade you to level 2. Let's make this harder. And we brought the feet together. And I remember like just a very tiny conversation that I had with him where he was just like, oh, that makes actually a pretty big difference. That does make it significantly harder. He's like, that's cool. Is this like level 2 of the assessment? And I didn't lie to him, but like in my head, I was thinking, I was like, yeah, kind of. Like there is no such thing as level 2. Like, we just did the assessment technically wrong the first time in order to regress it. But it was kind of cool. It was a really fun, like motivating thing for him to do. And it was relevant to something else that he was working on at the time. So that's what we're looking at here. So you're going to place your client in that push-up position with their feet together in order to create some more instability. And then the movement, kind of like I already described, is just going to be to reach over and touch your opposite hand. So instruct client to quickly move his or her right hand to touch the left hand. Perform alternating touches on each side for 15 seconds. Repeat for 3 trials. I wonder if I still have, actually, I made like a special assessment form for just all the stuff he wanted to work on. I wonder if I still have that somewhere on like my hard drive or something. Anyway, you're going to perform alternating touches. You're going to do as many as you can in 15 seconds. And then what you want to do, and it doesn't say it here, but you also want to give your client 60 seconds rest in between each set. So actually, I'm going to put that down here. Give client 60 seconds rest between sets. And then you'll repeat for a total of 3 trials. So basically, it looks something kind of like this. You're just going to go down on the floor. 36 inches apart, by the way, is pretty significant. You'll notice like that's pretty wide right there. You want to make sure that your client's not doing any funky stuff like this or dropping their hips down massively like that. You want to get them in a nice neutral position, and they're just going to reach over and touch just like that. And that's kind of the whole assessment. It's really fun. We'll get a chance to kind of do that when we get out in person. This is part of, again, like what I like to call the Sochi Olympics, which is what we always do at the end of PFT 101, which is where it's like, all right, let's go through all the overhead squat, because that's actually what's most important. We'll do the pushing and the pulling. We do all the like posture assessments. We write programs for them. And then we also just do a whole bunch of performance assessments just to kind of see in like, you know, where everybody ranks in class, like who can do their 40-yard dash the fastest and things like that. We got a ringer in this class right now, but it is kind of like fun little stuff like that that I think is always like kind of enjoyable. So actually, speaking of that, I mentioned it briefly this morning before we actually kind of got into things, and I know I'm kind of sidetracking here. But we were talking about meeting tomorrow. But then somebody gave me the idea of doing it on Friday instead, which is our test day, actually. Like, we're supposed to take our final exam on Friday, which would actually fit pretty well considering that our final exam usually just involves like playing the quizzes game, and then like putting up like an informal, like little 20-minute, 30-minute like review video that you guys can watch. Do you like that idea better rather than having an entire lecture that is just like recorded? Do you guys like the idea of meeting on a day that we have a test? And then what you do is you just go, you know, we meet in person and everybody just goes home and they get the weekend to take the final exam at some point. Do you guys like that idea better?
Me. Yep.
Yeah,
Better than doing it on Thursday, plus like, you know, go home and watch a video for a couple hours? Okay. I will relay that information is actually now. I just realized I can just text it and send it out. Sochimo. As he is saved in my phone. Yeah, we would post it on Friday, Nancy, but you would have like the entire weekend to kind of do it. And then we would just basically be skipping the quizzes thing, you know? I would still do a review video just like I normally do. It just wouldn't be like the playing of the game, you know, because you have your homework. You know, the way the homeworks are on Canvas now, it kind of is the quizzes game, you know? You have unlimited attempts and it shows you the correct answers and stuff. So that's kind of a suggestion that we were thinking.
I have a question too, Brett. On those quiz things, are they set up where we could actually take them once ourselves if we wanted to?
Which things? I'm sorry.
The quizzes. During my quizzes.
I could, yeah. I could totally set those up. Yeah, I could send them out.
But like you said, it's really the same thing as on the
right. Yeah. I mean, we were talking about that the other day. The quizzes review thing is much more relevant when our original, you know, in-person homeworks were paper. You know, now it's kind of become slightly less relevant in the sense that it's your homework and the practice is basically the same thing, you know?
Okay. Cool.
Brad, I have a quick question. What would the time frame be for Friday? Because I have a really important meeting at 12:30.
It would be over before then. Yeah, we would be meeting probably like 8:30. We don't want to be like together in person for too long. Not that I don't want to see you guys, but like, you know, we don't want to like completely over our stay. If we get, the reason we want to do like it's going to be more problematic for our evening session. But like if we do 8:30, there's just not very many people out in the park. And so we're less likely to kind of run into traffic and, you know, we can practice social distancing easier. In the evening class, it's going to be a little more challenging. I mean, luckily at 5:30, it's also like somewhat close to dinner time. So it does thin out a little bit, but there's just a lot of people out there still. But yeah, by 12:30, you know, that place gets packed. It's like a public park filled with people who are all out of a job right now. So like, it's a lot. Yeah, so 12:30 would be fine. I don't have an actual timeline though. I know that it would not be till 12:30. But to be honest, I actually haven't really done it this way before, so I don't really know how long it'll take actually. I'm assuming I'm gonna account for about 2 hours is what I'll probably plan for. Okay. So I sent Mo the Friday idea. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at, so that's our Davies test. And we'll actually watch like a quick little video of somebody actually going through this. I don't think this is instructional. I think this is just a dude doing it, but that's fine. So you can kind of see it here.
Place your hands wider than your shoulders in a plank position. As you tap each hand to the other, keep your plank position strong and flat with your shoulders and hips parallel to the floor.
That's pretty good. The real jock, huh? That's kind of, that guy has really good shoulder stability. Like his ability to like stop in between each rep was solid. So that's what we're looking at there, right? Basically 15 seconds, as many reps as you can get. He didn't quite have his toes together, but you know, pretty good example there. All right, the next one we got is our next performance assessment in your regular textbook, the sort of the last performance assessment besides like the upper and lower strength assessments, is going to be your Shark skill test. So this is the Shark's skill test. And this basically tests how well you can be a shark. No, but it's designed, it's a performance assessment designed to assess lower extremity agility and neuromuscular control. So just like before, right, we have the Davies test. The big one I want you to know is that it's upper extremity agility, right? With the Shark skills test, it's lower extremity agility. They often will pair those two up in terms of like questions. So just knowing like the agility part of it is like what makes one different than the other. That's kind of helpful there. And then knowing that they're both performance assessments, like that's the category that they're in. So again, this is going to test your balance. This is going to test your lower extremity agility. And the way it works is you have a 3x3 box, so like a 9 square box, and you're going to have your client stand in the center of it with one leg, hands on their hips. That's the hands on the hips part is actually pretty important. And what you're going to have them do is you're going to have them jump into each of the squares of the box, and this is important, always returning to the center square in between every rep. So you're going to have them go in whatever pattern that you designate. Me personally, I like to keep it really simple. I like to tell my client to go just like clockwise, you know, around like the square. They start in the corner and then they come up and go straight down. That's the pattern that like I tend to use and, you know, keep memorized. And then everybody does the same pattern. And that way, like, you know, your client can't go, oh, well, maybe the pattern was different. I should have gone this way, that way. You know, you just keep it really, really simple. But basically, they stand like so, and then you're going to have them jump from the center square into like maybe the front one, and then back into the center, and then over to the next one, and then back to the center. Now, this one is not 15 seconds, as many reps as you can get, because obviously that doesn't really make sense with completing a course. This is more kind of like a race. It's like, how fast can you get this assessment done? And so you're going to start you're going to start a timer, and you're going to time how long it takes your client to get through all the squares. And the rules are they have to keep their leg up the entire time. They can only have one leg on the ground. They have to keep their hands on their hips the entire time, and they always have to return to that center square. If they fail to return to the center square, they get like a penalty, which increases their time. Or if their hands come off their hips, they get a penalty, which increases their time. So again, it should look something kind of like this. They're going to stand, and they're going to go around the entire, I'm, you know, faking a square here. And they do as many reps as they do it as fast as they can. That is the Shark's skill test, right? It is, again, it's all about directional change, and so that's why it's considered an agility assessment. So should be viewed as a progression from the single leg squat. So this is pretty similar to the single leg squat in the sense that like you are assessing very similar things, right? Like your single leg squat is all about like core strength and ankle proprioception. Both of those things are totally necessary in order to have agility, right? If you're going to be able to change direction, you need to have proper core strength. If you're going to be able to change direction, you need to have adequate ankle proprioception. Without both those things, we can't really, we can't really like have agility. We can't have, if you can't move in one direction, you can't really change direction, like, this may not be suitable for everybody. It is a really high impact assessment, so we need to be aware of that. Again, if your client has, poor ankle proprioception or really bad overactive, underactive muscles in the ankle, this could be really relevant to them. We got 2 Deborahs joining us. You're back. Boy. So, oh no. There's always 2. All right. So your position.
Bless you.
What's that? Oh, thank you.
Bless you. Yeah.
Position your client. This is always so hard to write these notes. Position your client in the center box of a grid with hands on hips and standing on one leg. And then the movement, instruct them to hop in a designated pattern. Keep that pattern in mind. From box to box in a designated pattern. Be consistent with the pattern. What I recommend, guys, is just pick a pattern the first time you ever do this assessment with somebody and keep it for the rest of your career. That way you know that you're always doing it exactly the same way between every client. Birds fly and fish swim, and I always go in this pattern, that way it's not like a conscious, you don't have to think about it every time, it's just something that naturally happens. So be consistent every time. And then give your client one practice run with each of their feet. Give the client one practice run with each foot after you kind of explain the rules. So after you kind of explain to them like what the assessment's going to look like, give them a chance to kind of go through on both legs one time each and just see how long that takes them each time, and then it kind of gives them a benchmark to try to improve from. But that's not one of the scores that you're officially going to write down. And then perform twice with each foot. That means a total of 4 times. And keep track of the total time. Okay. I shouldn't say total. Just keep track of the time with your client, right? So then they can kind of see like how long their touches take. I like to average them out. I like to take the 2 scores and then just average them for my client, and then that way they can see their improvement through that. You could also just keep your general record and just whichever one is fastest. So that's also a way of doing it. You just want to be consistent again with however you do it. But there are penalties. Penalize 0.1 seconds for each of the following faults. So every time the non-hopping leg touches the ground, they get 0.1 seconds, right? Hands come off your hip. Hopping foot goes in the wrong square. And it says foot does not return to the center square. Yep, that's the same as foot going into the wrong square. So as you're doing this, make sure that your clients don't give up. One of the most common freaking things that you'll see is like somebody will be like, nah, oh, I was like, no, got to keep going. Otherwise, we're going to be at this all day. It's very easy to get kind of frustrated on this. It shouldn't, some people are going to complete this freaking thing in like 6 seconds, you guys know Joe. Well, some of you know Joe. She was just like a natural at this. The first time she ever tried it, she was like, I don't see what's so hard about this. And she's like, blah, 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 blah. It was one of the fastest first time people I've ever seen do it. And just like crushes it. And then some people are going to do it and then they get kind of frustrated and they're like, they kind of give up and you have to restart the assessment like over and over and over and over and over. Don't do that. Encourage your client to not give up in the middle of the assessment. That is really quite important. I know it sounds simple, but you'll know what I'm talking about once we actually go do it. Now, the rest of the performance assessment categories that we've got are actually very simple. This is what we'll look at tomorrow, but these are our actual strength assessments. So we do have like the bench press strength assessment. This is designed to assess like your 1 rep max. So when we are telling somebody to lift at 50 to 70% of their 1 rep max, this is where we get those numbers from, Generally, this is a pretty advanced assessment, but we'll kind of go into that tomorrow. We also have the lower body strength assessment, which is the barbell squat there. And so those are our two primary strength assessments, which also fall into that performance category. But we will finish that up tomorrow. Do you guys have any questions about the Davies test or the shark skill test? Nope. All right. I forgot. I wanted to show you, I kind of pantomimed about the shark skill test. I did want to show you the shark in action. That box is way too big. No. I mean, again, if he's being consistent, if like that's the one that you have at like whatever lab you're working at, go for it,
Let me show you.
Hush. You can totally do it in a giant box like that. But in general, you want it to be like 12-inch squares. Oop, okay, I skipped too far forward. Wow, that guy is very good at this. That's pretty darn good.
Square grid as shown, and assume a ready position in the center square with your hands on your hips. Start the test with single leg hops, alternating from the center square to the other squares using a clockwise pattern or counterclockwise pattern. 1/10 of a second will be deducted if you drop your hands or miss the appropriate box.
Dang. I guess speedy. I keep trying to do the sharks test. How many times do you allow them before you just wait for another day? Yeah, actually, that's not bad. That's not a bad question. Let's say your client, like, does give up. Wait, what did I click? Stop it. Let's say your client like does give up a bunch of times and you just keep struggling to like get the freaking information. And it's like, oh, I goofed up again. They drop their hands and just drop both feet to the ground and give up. Yeah, that's kind of a tough question to answer. I usually give my client, I usually give my client like 3 or 4 times before moving on. I don't know if I've ever really thought too much about whether or not I should just stop and move on to the next day. That's a really good question. I've never really thought about it, Nancy. But yeah, I'd say like if it gets to a point where like your client is just clearly, I mean, you're going to be watching them through the first time, and if they get like most of the way through it and then like give up, and then like you're like, okay, we got to start over because you kind of stepped out of the box or whatever, and you restart it and you notice that they are moving like way more sluggishly and like much more slowly, and that's like they give up again and then like they move even slower on that third try. You notice that there's like some diminishing returns there, you might be like, all right, we're moving on. That would probably be like a judgment call that would happen like in the moment. But basically that's sort of the the two primary ones that are in your textbook. Now, there are some other really cool performance assessments out there. There's another balance assessment that I kind of want to mention. This one here is called the STAR Excursion Balance Assessment. And this is a really great assessment that just tests your balance. You're going to notice kind of a basic version here where what she's going to do is she's just going to reach out and you're going to mark how far away you can reach away from your center. We know that like balance is a function of how far outside of our base of support. Like if your base of support is your center, how far you can move outside of that base of support, that is your balance, right? So what you're going to see is we're going to move in all directions here, and he's going to mark like how far she can kind of reach out.
This test measures motor control, neuromuscular efficiency, balance, and active range of motion from the ankle, knee, hip, and lumbar spine. Prep for this test can be used using the mat provided within the text or a tape replica as shown here. To perform this test, I'm going to have the athlete stand single leg with their midfoot on the center of the mat of the grid. From there, I'm going to have them put their hands on their hips and reach with their free limb forward anteriorly as far as they can without putting their foot down and come back to the center position. So there, I'm going to have them reach diagonally back to the center position. Laterally, posterior laterally, posteriorly, posterior medially, medially, anterior medially. From there, I'm going to have the athlete switch their legs and perform the test on the opposite leg.
So he's not marking
the goniometer at the ankle, the knee, hip, and lumbar spine. Results for this test can show asymmetries between the left and the right side and limb dysfunction, which will show a greater increase of risk potential.
Yeah, she struggled on that one.
Pros for this test
actually,
its ease of use, its low costs, and its reliability. Cons for this test are its inefficiencies within the group setting.
So, so that's kind of a cool version there. Now, sometimes you'll work, if you end up working in like a PT clinic or something like that, sometimes you'll see there'll be like these really cool little mats that you can use that actually have STAR Excursion kind of built into them. Like this one right here, you can see he's actually, oh, that's kind of funny. Is he doing an upper body version? Oh, that's very weird. I like that though. Where is the, yeah, so here's like kind of so like using a mat version, and it has like grids, and basically you can mark it with like a coin or something. We used to use pennies. There's another really good one. Yeah, this one right here. This is like a mat that I've seen sold, carpet cues. I've looked these up before and showed these in class. But these are kind of interesting. They have these kind of built-in little checkpoints, and then it has like a little, check out, like it has this hook for a tape measure kind of built into the mat. Skipping forward to the relevant stuff. So you kind of place this little tape measure there, and then they reach out.
The STAR Excursion Balance Test. And this is a test that measures left to right, involved to uninvolved, for problems with balance, coordination, and functional weakness. So you need to first stand on the foot and reach forward, touching as far as you can. I will mark it with the toe marker. We'll go back to center. And then I'll repeat clockwise. Around in the STAR configuration that we have set up here. The carpet fuse tape has a hook that easily attaches to the measurement.
So yeah, this is kind of cool. And you can see, again, you're trying to measure for asymmetries, right? Like you're looking for, you know, can they reach out further on their left leg than they can on their right leg? That's why that one was dead center. So you can see, like, you know, this side is much shorter than that side. So kind of cool. You'll have if you end up working in a place where like you have one of these mats or something kind of similar to this. I've never worked with that mat. I always like showing that video because it popped up in my feed one day and I was like, that was awesome. But like, you know, a lot of places you'll have tape on the ground. You know, we've got all those random things taped on the floor at Sochi. This is where a lot of that kind of comes from. So that's another version of a performance assessment, right? That's the STAR excursion test. You've also got things like the double leg lowering test. This is a really good assessment for core strength, actually. Now, this is not in your regular textbook, but you will see this in your, you will find this in your sports performance textbook. So in the PES, you're going to see this assessment right here. This is pretty interesting. This is a very unique test. Ooh, that is quiet. Hopefully you guys can hear that. Good Lord, that's quiet. That's as loud as it goes. Can you guys hear that?
No.
No.
This was the highest quality one I found. Let's see if we can maybe find. Let's see this video here.
Approximately the pressure set.
All right, well, this will work. This is in your sports performance textbook, and you actually need to have a blood pressure cuff in order to be able to do this assessment. The Sorensen, no, sorry, just the double leg lowering test.
It's one test with which the sports performance professional can effectively assess neuromuscular control and strength of the core. The materials needed are a trainer's table or a raised flat surface, a goniometer, and a blood pressure cuff. Start by having the client sit on the table and lie supine with the flat blood pressure cuff under the lumbar spine at approximately L4 or L5. Next, with the client's legs fully extended,
Good Lord, this guy's
to
typos.
90 degrees or to the amount of flexion that does not cause posterior pelvic tilt. Next, raise the cuff pressure to 44 millimeters. Ensure that the pressure settles and the needle sets at 40 millimeters to ensure consistency from test to test. Next, instruct the client to perform a drawing-in maneuver by pulling their belly button to their spine and maintain while keeping their lumbar spine in contact with the pressure cuff. Now instruct the client to lower their legs toward the table while maintaining the drawing-in maneuver. The test is over when the pressure in the cuff decreases or the pressure increases as the client allows the abdominal wall to protrude. At the point of the pressure change, the hip angle is now measured with the goniometer to determine the angle. Core stability is determined by the following. Poor is 90 to 76 degrees, fair 75 to 46, good 45 to 15 degrees. The pros of this assessment are the goniometer and the pressure cuff and their simplistic nature in the test. The cons are the participants' cooperation and their ability to perform the maneuver successfully and correctly.
Yeah, a lot of clients either won't have hamstring mobility to raise their legs straight up overhead, or they might just not have enough core strength to be able to do that either. So you'll notice, did he show, like, did you guys see the blood pressure spike? Like, did you see the pressure increase? Did they film that? I looked down to answer a darn text message.
I didn't see it.
So, okay, well, that's what he mentioned. He did mention it. Like, he was like, what you're going to look for is like a big increase in pressure. Basically, as your client like has their legs up, there should be you know, just exactly 40 bits of pressure, right? And as the legs come down, there's a moment where they will start driving their low back into the floor. And that moment is where you'll see the blood pressure go, it'll spike like crazy. And then what you do is you measure the angle. Like if they got all the way from here, get like all the way down, well then, you know, that's pretty good, right? Like they basically are able to control their core the entire leg. But if they're, you know, driving their legs down, all of a sudden their low back kind of pushes into that blood pressure cuff and you see the spike happen, that's going to show poor core stability. So that's a kind of a fun assessment.
Again, Brad, that seems like a lot to do.
It is, yeah, and that's the thing. Like
That's
these
the
are
version of that. Just simple, easy, get to the point, let's move along. That's like a whole.
Yeah, and that's where, you know, your regular textbook has only Davies test, shark skill test. You know, they keep it really simple. And like both those things assess your core strength, you know. A single leg squat assesses your core strength, you know, how well you can stabilize your core by balancing on one leg. You're getting plenty of that stuff, you know, out of the way. But if you're like training an athlete, you know, like let's say you're training like a power lifter or something, and like you need to make sure you're trying to figure out like what's going on with their squat form, because maybe they just have like really bad alterations in their squat, and they're like, yeah, I keep getting low back pain when I'm squatting, and it's like they have normal, like their posture looks pretty decent and stuff, and it's like, what's going on? It could show like a lack of core stability. You have access to an assessment like this to maybe look for a little bit of that core strength. You know what I mean? And obviously these are all, you know, optional assessments. Performance assessments are not the most necessary. The ones we really want you guys to focus on are that overhead squat, the single leg squat, the pushing and the pulling. And I always forget to mention it, but also just like static posture, right? Paying attention to static posture as well. Those are really the big key ones. But yeah, no, you're right. It is a lot. And there's going to be even more when we get together on Friday. Because it'll be a fun opportunity for us to just kind of, it's just a fun little competitive day. All right. So let us go ahead and look at some alterations in the overhead squat again. So I'm going to pull up my ES table here. So yesterday we left off, we have talked about feet turning out, and we've talked about knees caving in, and we talked briefly about knees caving out, although we didn't necessarily build a program for that, so we'll kind of have to circle back around to that one. We looked at excessive forward lean and low back arching yesterday. Also low back rounding, we didn't really go over that one yesterday. We mentioned it briefly. We'll kind of go over that one, also kind of circle back around to it in the end. But yesterday we spent time talking about forward head posture and shoulder elevation. And then today we're also going to look a little bit at like arms falling forward. Okay, so arms falling forward is another really common postural distortion that you're going to see. Basically, a client just doesn't have the strength to keep those arms up overhead, right? And so just tight muscles are causing that to maybe fall downward as they, you know, move through that squat. That is very associated with like upper body dysfunction, very, very similar to what's causing a lot of forward head postures and stuff. And you're going to see these muscles are, you're going to see which ones are overactive and underactive here. So, you know, looking at the forward head posture, yesterday we talked about how that's going to be your levator scapulae, your sternocleidomastoid, and your scalenes, right? Those muscles that either pull your shoulders upwards or actually actively round you forward here. You know, the levator scapulae in particular is kind of notorious for that because, you know, that muscle elevates your scapula, but it pulls on the front of your scapula, right? Like it's attaching to the front of it, so it's also tilting your scapula forward. Like if you look here, it pulls this way, causing that rounding to happen, which is what further causes like that forward head posture, right? So that's the levator scapula that we're talking about there. And then our other side of things, we're just going to see like those scalenes as well, right? So we talked about that yesterday, but similar to that, are clients who have arms falling forward posture in the overhead squat. So when they're squatting, right, they're going to go into their normal position. And then basically as they squat, it looks something more like this, right? Like they might not have any dysfunction in the lower body. Like that might be pretty good. But if you look, their arms are not able to keep in line with their body. Ideally, there should be a nice straight line. There should be a nice straight line all the way. Of course, that's showing pictures of that overhead squat assessment. All the way from hips to wrists, right? It should travel all the way up there, nice and even. If the arms are falling forward, you're seeing something more like this, right? So overactive muscles, what's pulling their arms down? Big bad guy here. Latissimus dorsi, right? So your lats, right, those big muscles, remember, they're in charge of exactly the opposite of raising the arms up. They're in charge of shoulder extension. They're also in charge of adduction, right? So they're pulling this way. And then everybody really quick, just try taking your palms. You're in the anatomic position here. Pull your palms this way and then round your shoulders slightly and try to raise your arms all the way up overhead if you can. You'll notice you're going to have that forward arm posture, right? You're not really going to have the ability to get all the way up if you've got those rounded shoulders. So when you are protracting and horizontally adducting, that makes it really difficult for you to raise your arms up overhead. And that's where our next muscles come in, the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor. Both of those are going to be overactive. So your pec major is primarily in charge of horizontal adduction, but that puts your glenohumeral joint into a place of, into an angle where it wants to come forward around the front of the body, right? So that's that shoulder protraction, which your pec minor is really in charge of shoulder protraction, right? Like your pec minor is actually responsible for the protracting part, your pec major horizontally adducting the arm. So all of that is leading to struggling as you try to raise your arms up overhead, right? And then you've also got your teres major here. Teres major, remember, that is not officially part of your rotator cuff, but it is located right next to all of your rotator cuff muscles. So teres major, right? It runs all the way from the back of the scapula, but it inserts on the front of the humerus, right? So it runs and inserts here. That's why when it pulls, it internally rotates. So again, your client is having too much internal rotation, which is why they're struggling to raise their arms up overhead. And then there's one on this list we haven't spent a lot of time talking about, which is your coracobrachialis, which I don't know why I opened that. Coracobrachialis. Little tiny muscle right on that acromion, right? I'm sorry, coracoid process. It's literally the name. Right in the coracoid process there, right? And running to the center of your humerus, right? So that is supposed to kind of assist in stabilizing as you do overhead movements like this. Like if I hold like a dumbbell in my hand like this and do a raise like this, right? This is running from here to here. So it's supposed to assist in stabilizing my arm while I'm doing that. The problem is it often gets overactive. And then when it pulls, rather than just helping raise the arm up overhead, it pulls so much on this little process right here that it ends up anteriorly tilting my scapula. Again, very similar to how the levator scapulae pulls forward, right? Because your pec minor is also right there. Both of those are that is a very zoomed out picture. There we go. Both of those are inserting on the same spot, right? They're both attached in the same little process right there. And so what that does is that rounds you forward like this, making it very difficult for you to raise your arms up overhead. And this is why, like, if you've ever gotten like a massage, like right here in that little spot, as your shoulder kind of pokes through, your scapula pokes through, Like that is a pretty tender massage oftentimes. So those are our overactive muscles, right? Now your underactive muscles, this is sometimes one that surprises people, but it's going to be your middle and lower trapezius. And some people are going like, wait a minute. My lower trapezius is in charge of like scapular retraction and depression. What does that have to do with raising my arm overhead, right? Like that muscle is primarily like my deltoid, just raising my arms up, right? So what does my mid and lower trap have to do with that? Well, you got to remember, oh, hold on. But does that massage help the person? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Massage, like SMR is going to be used to inhibit those overactive muscles, or massage techniques, right? Like inhibiting those overactive muscles is the first step that we want to take before like we get into like lengthening them out, right? Like you want to take your probable overactive muscles and you always want to like do some type of soft tissue work, whether that's like foam rolling or massage, or heck, it can be using one of these little things, you know? Like, if you got it, you know, take the gun to the pec minor. So like, you're gonna massage all that out. What that does is that kind of, you know, creates a little bit of autogenic inhibition and relaxes any nodes that are holding onto, and it beats up any scar tissue and allows things to be a little more pliable. And then what you do after you're done inhibiting everything is you lengthen all that stuff out, right? Particularly a nice straight arm pec stretch here is going to be really good, because that is going to pull into horizontal abduction as well as like, you know, pull my shoulder back. So I'm getting a really good stretch from like this straight arm pec stretch there. I could also just do a pec major stretch, which is just this version here. Both those are going to be really, really good, because like now that everything's kind of beat up and relaxed, I can lengthen it out and train my nervous system to say, hey, this is the length these muscles are supposed to be. Then I can take it even further and I can adjust my underactive muscles by further pulling things back and getting into a neutral position. So we're pulling that altered joint back to a neutral length, right? When we see like an altered length tension, altered length tension relationship, right? We're seeing, that's not the one I want to look at. Altered joint mechanic. Looking for a picture here. There we go. We're seeing something like this, right? We're seeing like too much pulling over here and not enough over here. So we're going to inhibit this first, then we're going to lengthen it, then we're going to activate this muscle and like integrate it with like how to work with the rest of our body. That's going to pull this back into a neutral position. So that's really what we're going for here when we're training, you know, this overactive, underactive stuff. This is why our posture assessments are so important. They tell us, you know, what to inhibit and what to inhibit and what to activate. So the middle and lower traps sometimes don't make a ton of sense. Like, obviously, if somebody is like shoulder rounding, they're protracting, we know that the middle and lower trapezius are going to be antagonists to those protractors, right? Like if your pec minor is protracting your shoulders forward, we want to pull in the opposite direction. We want to pull into retraction to get those shoulders back to neutral, right? Same thing with your rhomboids, right? Your middle trapezius and your rhomboids are really, really responsible for retracting those shoulders. And then your lower traps are also doing a little bit of retraction as well. But sometimes the lower traps is surprising, because you're like, isn't that in charge of like shoulder depression, right? What does that have a lot to do with like the opposite of raising my arms up overhead? But you got to remember, like they are providing that lower stability to the scapula. Like your scapula, as you raise your arm up overhead, you know, it's being pulled into like these angled positions. And so when you're pulling downward, you're providing that stability. Again, it's kind of like, I always like to use it as like the rock climber analogy. It's like if somebody is like belaying over a freaking, you know, cliff and you've got like a rope there, you're not trying to hold that rope over like this as you're trying to like pull them up, you know. You would want to use the lever and kind of pull this way at an angle like this as it's like traveling over, right? You're providing downward force. That keeps your scapula stabilized. So as your scapula is able to stay in place, you're going to more effectively be able to raise your arms up overhead. So your lower traps are actually really important there. Again, it's not so much a concentric motion that they're performing as much as it is like isometric. You're teaching your low traps how to isometrically stabilize the scapula. And that's why it's so important to like train your low traps. And then the next one we're going to see is the rotator cuff. This one's always obviously going to be the opposite. Your rotator cuff opposite of your teres major, right? This is where your teres minor and your spinatus muscles come in. So we look at like, you know, the rotator cuff here. If this person has excessive rounding, they are internally rotating. You can usually spot somebody who's going to be an arms fall forward person, by the way. You can usually spot them before you actually have them do the overhead squat if they stand like this, where like their hands are kind of resting almost on the front of their thighs there, and then like their thumbs are facing each other. That's a rounded shoulder position, and that's internal rotation. If they tend to sit a little more like this, where their palms are a little more at their sides and their thumbs are naturally resting in like a neutral position, that means that they have enough like neutral retraction, right? So obviously what here you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna strengthen that rotator cuff by performing external rotations, right? They should be performing rotations where maybe they're pulling from here straight back like that, right? Or, you know, central and pulling straight back like that. All those are going to be really good. And then we're also going to see the posterior deltoid. And your posterior deltoid is in charge of horizontal abduction, right? That little tiny deltoid muscle is working against that big pectoralis muscle. So your pec performs horizontal abduction, your posterior delt does horizontal abduction. So things like reverse cable flies, right? Reverse flies where you're doing stuff like that are going to be really good. Reverse dumbbell flies too, just literally like that. Those are great ways to kind of work on a little bit of retraction while also doing that horizontal abduction. So in particular, clients with arms falling forward, those are sort of our big ones that we're going to want to hit. Now, normally, we address overactive and underactive muscles in our movement prep section, right? And then we get into, our workout, and that's where once everything's active, we're able to kind of work out normally. So it can sometimes be a little challenging to get these exercises in just the normal exercises that are given in your textbook. You know, there's some kind of real basic ones given in there. So we might look at a couple that are a little bit off book today. But we'll try our best to kind of use those basic examples. Does anybody have any questions about any of that before we build a workout here? Where the heck is my OPT template?
Well, you just you gave me a little game because I know in the book it just said that the posterior deltoid was in charge of external rotation and extension, but I didn't know it was horizontal abduction as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, like your posterior deltoid, yeah, it's helping, with this motion here,
Gotcha.
Which is obviously, again, it's this little itty bitty bacon strip working against, hot roast. It's a lot. It's a little tiny muscle. This is why, like, man, it's always so funny. Whenever you get these guys, right? Like, you'll go into a gym and you'll be training somebody, and it'll be like, I like to do the agonist antagonist thing. I love doing that. It's one of my favorite like styles of supersetting. And so like all the client do like, some type of like chest fly, and then I'll usually have them do some type of like reverse fly if I pair those two up. And it'll be on like a cable machine, right? And usually this is only like a bodybuilder. Like I don't do a lot of like flies in general. I think that motion is okay. I mean, it's a good way to build like mass, but it's not a very functional type of strength, There's just not very much time, and there's not very many situations in nature where you need to grab something from here and pull it with a straight arm like this, it's kind of like sit-ups. Like I think sit-ups are a great way to build your abs and stuff. And like I want to have good core strength to be able to do this, but like there's not a time in nature where I've ever had like a rope and I've had to pull it like this. Like, you know, I'm gonna do that. So like it's not, I don't do a lot of like the unfunctional stuff unless I'm training a bodybuilder, in which case, like if somebody's trying to carve something out specifically, it's like, all right, we're gonna beat that muscle into submission until it pops out of your skin. Like now we're gonna do lots of flies, you know? So one of my, it's so funny when you have like a guy comment, usually, and it's usually like, you know, it's usually like a guy more so than most ladies, but they tend to get like, you know, you give them this like ton of weight on like a cable fly, and then you pull the pins and you put it on like 5 pounds, and they have to do the reverse fly. And every time they're like, oh, I can definitely do way more than 5 pounds. And I'm like, I don't know, buddy. Like these are really tiny muscles. I'm telling you. This is also a very mechanically unadvantageous position. So like you don't have very much size helping with this, and you don't have very much like physics helping with it either. Like this is a little tiny lever against a whole arm. And he's like, I don't know, you put it on, try 20. It's like, okay. And like it happens every time. It's like, put it on 20. It's like 3, 2, didn't work, did it? All right. I put it on. It's like, there we go. And they're like, oh, that burns, you know, and it's like crazy hard. Millions of times you're gonna have that. I'm describing this now. You're gonna think back on this Zoom call in 5 years and be like, he was right every freaking time. It's kind of like just the difference between like, you think about like the first time you ever did like a preacher curl, like how much weight you were able to do because you had like, you were bracing against like this pivot point right here. And then think about the time that you tried to do the same amount of weight with just like classic like free hanging curl. Totally like humbling, right? That is mechanically advantageous position. That is that in a nutshell. All right, let's look at our 3 things today. So the first one we're gonna, well, 2 things really, but 3 different postures. We are gonna first look at forward head and shoulder elevation, and then we will look at arms fall forward. Now, a lot of times you're gonna have a blend of all this coming together. But for now, we're gonna kind of break them up. So first we're gonna look at is an example, forward head posture and elevated shoulders. Okay, we're gonna put our client in phase 1. So our overactive muscles for forward head are gonna be the levator scapulae, the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, the levator scapulae, the sternocleidomastoid, the scalenes, well, not the scalenes, sorry, the scapula there, and the upper trapezius. So really, when it comes down to like foam rolling, how the heck are you gonna foam roll all of this next stuff, right? You're gonna take a roller and just put it there? No. So there's not a lot of like SMR work that you can do in particular for each of those little individual spots. But one thing that you can do is foam rolling your upper back in general, that thoracic spine. So when you're foam rolling your thoracic spine, SMR thoracic, pretty darn simple stuff here, right? Like you'll notice like as you're doing, you're really just placing it on the upper back there, and you're just gonna kind of roll and kind of mash that whole area together. That's about as low as you wanna go, by the way. I really wouldn't go any lower than that. But what that does is that's getting into just like as your upper traps are like inserting, you're kind of getting right into that. Now, there are a few other ones that you can do here that are not in your textbook. So I'm gonna go a little off book here, but you can also do your upper traps. You can get up top here, particularly well with like a lacrosse ball. So if you look, SMR upper trapezius, or a theracane. Actually, that's a really good one. Actually, let's look at the theracane real quick. If you look at your theracane here, right, this is a special little tool. Let me show you what it is first. It's this weird kind of Dr. Seuss looking hook thing. But it has all these different attachment sites. So you can see like here, it allows you to kind of reach around your body. So she can get, really, seriously? She can get like into like her upper back there. This is a really great way to kind of get into your trapezius muscles. So Theracane's really good. You don't necessarily need it. You can always place a lacrosse ball on your upper traps as well. This guy's here is using an actual bar at the gym. Is he holding that bar? Well, that's kind of silly if he is. You can also just go up to like a Smith machine and just kind of place your body up underneath it and kind of push into that. That's another really good way to do it. But typically, right here, this is what you're going to go for. Okay. You'll notice she's also doing a really good job. She's pulling the head back, which is a great like little activator while she's doing this, putting it into a stretch position. So we're going to say SMR, thoracic spine. We're going to say upper trapezius. And then one other one. Now, this is for the forward head posture. It's not always relevant, but again, because it's not on the list officially, right? If we look at it, you're not going to see the lats in either of these. But generally, again, like getting into those lat muscles down here, which are causing that internal rotation, which we know makes shoulder rounding worse, is definitely something to look for. So we're going to add the lats on here. Right? So coaching tip, we got to put for upper trapezius, use lacrosse or tennis ball. Okay. Now there is one other one that's also pretty relevant here, similar to similar to doing your lats. You've also got your pec minor. Now this one can be kind of challenging. This is a great picture, by the way. Look at that. You can see big ribs here and as it's inserting. So this one can be kind of challenging to like place a ball effectively. But what you can do is you can actually use the lacrosse ball and you go up to a wall like this and you press it right onto that coracoid process, right? As your scapula swings around, you're going to press it right in there. You can see this version here. She's pressing a lacrosse ball there, that version there, right? Those are really effective ways. You're basically just placing that tennis ball right here because you are trying to get into that Golgi tendon organ, right? Which is always located either at the origins or insertions. In this case right here. So if you can do that, I definitely recommend it. That's another really great way to kind of address, you know, that tilting motion. But for now, we got 3 foam rollers here. We'll kind of leave that alone. We'll put it in the next one. So let's go ahead and get into some stretches here. Now, for question, hold on one second. I need to decide. Yeah, excellent. See you later, Deborah. So the next one we got to look at, let's go ahead and stretch everything out, right? Now, when you're looking at this list, there's no special order, you know, there's not like a particular order that you need to do these things in. But me personally, I like to go from the back to the front. So I like to start with my levator scapulae first. So what you're going to do in order to stretch out your levator scapulae, right, like that's that muscle right here in the back, you're going to take your head over and look over to one side. So if I'm going to look to my left shoulder, and then I'm going to tuck my chin down towards my left side. I'm going to take my left arm up and cup it over the back of my head, and I'm going to gently pull down like this. That's going to give me that stretch right back here. And then what I'm doing, remember, this is in charge of elevating my scapula. So I'm going to push my opposite arm. I'm going to pull that down towards the floor, and I'm going to keep my thumb rotated towards the outside of my body into that external rotation. So basically, you're just looking right into your armpit. And that's going to be your levator scapulae. So we're going to do a static levator scapulae stretch. And that is in your textbook. Just like that. Then we are going to do your upper traps. So the next one you're going to do is you're just going to take the head straight over to the side, That's going to be your upper trapezius. So static upper trapezius stretch. That one is also in your textbook. So now we've addressed this guy, and we've addressed this guy. Now, your sternocleidomastoid is also in your textbook. Actually, that one's easy still. So then once I've gone like down and I've gone here, now I'm going to look straight up towards the ceiling, and I'm actually going to take my hand from behind my head. I'm actually going to wrap it up kind of like right out of my forehead here, and I'm going to pull gently backwards like this. Again, same concept here. I'm going to drive that arm down towards the floor, and that's going to give me that sternocleidomastoid slash scalenes stretch. And that's really good. I do like that version as it is in your textbooks, but I think that the version that NASM has, if we look at it here, let's see, NASM sternocleidomastoid. Oh, actually, they got a different version up on their YouTube channel now. Let's watch this real quick. I don't want to get too distracted, but hey, she's got the version I wanted to do. Oh, okay, kind of. That's pretty good. So this is a good sternocleidomastoid. This is honestly more of a scalenes stretch. Personally, I think that this is much more of a scalene stretch. You can see, like, if we look at the difference, right, between our scalenes and your, what did I say? What did I type in? If you look at your scalenes, right, they're these little tiny ones on the side here versus your sternocleidomastoid, which is this really large one right here. So you can see the scalenes are underneath it. The sternocleidomastoid's right here, but they're inserting into different places, right? Your scalenes insert on that top rib there. Your sternocleidomastoid inserts onto your collarbone, right? So that's coming across here and inserting onto your sternum there as well. So you can see, like, that's a very different thing. So this version's good. Like, this version is a great stretch, but I think this is much, much more for your scalenes personally. One of my favorite ways to get the sternocleidomastoid, and this is a different version, is where you are going to depress your collarbone. So I think this is going to be an okay version. I never know what I'm getting myself into when I click links. Yeah, a little bit like that. She's not pulling her head back very much. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to press your hand onto your collarbone, and you're actually going to actively depress that down. So you're going to push, and then you are going to take your head towards the opposite side and then look straight back. And that is going to be right in that really thick part of your sternum. Your SCM. That is my favorite version of that stretch. So I'm not going to put that on here because I only want to kind of stay as textbook as possible, but this is one of my all-time favorite versions of that. So we'll do a static sternocleidomastoid stretch, which the version you're going to see is this version here, which is still really good. That's still a really great stretch. And then we're going to do a static ball lat stretch. Okay. Treadmill. Now on your upper body stuff, you can really do anything here. You know, when it comes down to like your cardio, this is upper body dysfunction. So honestly, one of my favorite ones would be like a rowing machine, just because that's a really good opportunity for your client to kind of work on that rowing posture. And we never get to put rowing machines on as our warm-up, so we're going to put that today. Rowing machine, and then we're going to do one set of everything. We'll do 30 seconds each for everything. 5 minutes here. 50 to 60. Well, 40 to 60% heart rate max, depending on the client. It's pretty big range. All right, now let's address the underactive stuff. So our underactive stuff here is going to be your deep cervical flexors, mid-lower traps, rhomboids, and rotator cuff. So deep cervical flexors, that's honestly something that you strengthen by pulling your head back like that, right? You're doing the double chin tuck there, which is a great exercise, but definitely not listed on sort of the basics of program design. You know, like if we pull up in that list of stabilization exercises and we go to like the core balance reactive section, you're definitely not going to see any of the you know, deep cervical flexors. But remember, it is a chin tucking motion, right? You're going to pull your head down and back. So if we look at like exercises like marching or a two-legged floor bridge, or actually, I guess that's it for the list. That gives us an opportunity to place our head on the floor, and then we can lift our head up and tuck our chin. So if I were doing like a floor bridge, right? And I hope you guys can see this. You know what I can do is I can blow up my own camera, and then you can see like that. We are evolving. We're learning things. Okay, so if I go like this, right? And I, you know, this is my classic like two-legged floor bridge, right? I'm in the position now. But what I can do is I can lift my head up off the floor, tuck my chin, and then place the back of my head further down. And now I've got this little chin tuck position, and now I can do hip raises, right? I could do single leg if I wanted to. You know, I can do all these like different versions, and now I've activated a little bit of my deep cervical flexors. And that's going to help me sort of work on that while I'm getting a little bit of core strength in. So that's going to be a really good one right there. We can do a two-legged floor bridge, and in our coaching tip, we can say, you know, tuck the chin, activate the deep cervical flexors. But let's see what's some of our other muscles that we've got to work with here, right? We've got the middle and lower trapezius muscles, we've got the rhomboids, and we've got the rotator cuff. So another one that we can do, so if we're going to pick two core exercises, one balance exercise and one reactive exercise, and be able to hit all of those muscles, instead of going with like the two-legged floor bridge, which is great for the glutes, by the way, one of my favorite exercises, we can instead go for a little bit of like marching, which is going to be a little bit more traditional for like my front of my core. Like a floor bridge is really good for like, you know, you're stabilizing in the front, but you're using a lot of glute and a little bit of low back there and a little bit of hamstring. If we go with marching, that's going to put it sort of more traditionally on the front, because in a second, we're going to do, if we look at the floor prone cobra or the quadruped opposite arm, opposite leg raise, or the ball cobra, all of those are going to be a good way for me to focus on spinal extension, which is going to strengthen my erector spinae, which, you know, also might help pull that back a little bit. But really the big one here is the floor prone cobra. You're going to do that arm pull backwards like this, which is activating our low traps, right? So I'd say that's going to be a really big one here. But remember, when you're doing that prone cobra, guys, you want to keep that chin tuck. A lot of your clients have this nasty habit. Is my head still in there? A lot of people have a nasty habit of doing this, where they take their head up. That's not what we're going for. You want to tuck the chin and reach back like this, okay? External rotation and retraction of the shoulders as you're going back into that cobra. So now we've kind of addressed both sides. We got a little bit of front, we got a little bit of the back, and we're able to do a little bit for the chin tuck and a little bit for the low trap. So we're gonna say marching. Coaching tips, keep chin tucked for deep cervical flexors, okay? Then we're also gonna say floor prone cobra, right? Focus on scapular retraction. That's going to be a really big one there. Now, we also need to strengthen our rhomboids and rotator cuff muscles, right? So those are muscles that perform, you know, motions where we're pulling backwards like that. And if we go into like, and we need a balance exercise here, we got single leg balance, balance of reach, throw and catch, single leg opposite arm and leg motion, and then single leg windmill. So your single leg windmill, if I can find that. Is a great exercise. Basically, well, that's actually not the NASM video, but we'll take it. I guess that's the only one I'm gonna get. Where you're gonna basically reach across to your opposite leg there, okay? He's going a little bit low, like he's getting a little bit into like some knee bending action here, which in stabilization, we're really not focusing on. We're focusing on like little to no movement of that leg there. But you'll notice like with the nice straight arms he's going into, he's able to like focus on scapular retraction there. Now, personally, guys, my favorite exercise to do with something like this is actually a single leg external rotation. So I'll usually do like a cable external rotation where I'll have somebody, you know, use like a cable machine and hold like this. That's one of my favorite versions here. Or a single leg lift and chop, right? Where my scapula has to stabilize as I move through like a full range of motion there. But we're trying to get some fun like variety in here. So let's go with that single leg windmill. Another good one would be like a YTA. What you can also do that is a really great rhomboid trap activator is just a slight hinge at the waist and have your clients do Ys, Ts, and As. Those are also really great ways to kind of activate the scapula. But again, we're trying to stay on book here. Lastly, we need a reactive exercise. If we go to our stabilization list, right, we've got box jumps, we've got cone jumps, multiplanar jumps. Let's just go, you know, this is not super relevant to the upper body. So we'll just go with a cone, jump, sagittal to stabilization. Okay, keep it simple, 3 sets of everything. With our marching, let's do 10 each for 20 total. Floor prone cobra, let's do 30 seconds. Actually, you know what? Let's not do it for, we'll do it for reps. 20 reps there. Single leg windmill, 10 each, and we'll do 8 of those. Slow, slow. There we go. And then we will sort of copy this onto our cooldown. And that's not too bad of an example. Do you guys have any questions about why we picked what we picked? Questions or comments? Again, my favorite versions are YTAs when it comes to the movement prep stuff. Like I like to do all that. I like external rotations personally. But this is not bad if we're staying perfectly with only the examples that are in your textbook. Obviously, we start to move outside of textbook once we get into the real world. Like, you know, even when you get to capstone, actually, you'll get to kind of practice a lot of those other versions. But for now, those are very, very clean examples. All right, every time. Why do you always do that? All right, let's look at an example, arms fall forward client, okay? So very, very similar here, right? Arms falling forward and shoulder elevation. We're gonna see a lot of muscles that are pretty familiar. When it comes to templating, pretty similar stuff here. Again, we're looking for the mid traps, the rhomboids, the rotator cuff, but we're also gonna see like the posterior deltoid here. So overactive muscles, latissimus dorsi, pecs, teres major and coracobrachialis, you're not really going to do much for. You can, by the way, work on your coracobrachialis when you are doing the lacrosse ball on the pec minor. You also can get into your arm as well, into its insertion point, right on your bicep there, but it tends to be pretty tender considering that you're also digging through your biceps. So that sometimes is not the most pleasant. So we are going to foam roll first. Our upper trapezius, latissimus dorsi, and pec minor. Okay, so we are going to place that lacrosse ball on, so for upper trapezius and pec minor, use lacrosse or tennis ball. Okay, so you're going to need to press that here and here. And then you're going to foam roll onto your lats. So looking at our stretches here, first one we've got is doing the ball lat stretch for that latissimus dorsi. So ball, static ball lat stretch. Right, going from there, we've got the pectoralis major and the pectoralis minor here. If you go to your list, you're not going to see a huge difference here. Where are you at? You're just going to see static pectoral stretch. There are ways to target your pec minor. In particular, if you go with this is the static pectoral wall stretch that Nassim's talking about, that is going to be 90 degrees at your elbow as you rotate away. To get the pec minor, you actively need to press your scapula backwards while you're doing a pec stretch. So this works really well if you have like the full length of a wall. You're actually going to press, your arm's going to line up on the, I don't have a great way of showing this, but your arm's going to line up on the entire wall there, and then you're going to rotate away like this. And what that does is that actively pushes your scapula back by actually pressing on that coracoid process. Alternatively, you can do a ball pectoral stretch. I think Nassim's actually got an example of this on their page. Yeah, so you can do a ball pectoral stretch, which looks like this. And then you can just press into that like so. If he presses that ball a little bit closer, you can see he can actually push into that coracoid process a little bit. So that's another really good one. But we're going to do the static ball lat stretch, and then we're going to go with the textbook version, which is just the static pectoral stretch. Static pectoral wall stretch. Then arms falling forward again. We're going to see the teres major. Do I have a teres major stretch in here in the regular textbook? I think it's in the corrective textbook. It is. That sucks. Okay. So we'll go with the upper trap stretch. Static upper trapezius stretch. And then, yeah. Okay, so we're going to, I didn't want to go off book. We're going to go a little bit off book because this is in your corrective book once you get to it. You are also going to do a static, you're going to do a static teres major stretch. So that is actually going to be similar to the pectoral wall stretch. You're going to line your arm up onto the wall, and then you are going to externally rotate the palm away, and then hold that in this position here. So it's going to be a static teres major stretch. Okay, like that. Hold. Okay, that's your teres major stretch. One set of everything. 30 seconds each. I tried really hard to stay only in the regular book. It's just they don't have that many exercises in there. They want to keep it simple for people who are new, and it's like, sometimes we need some complication. All right, so again, your prone cobra is going to be key here, right? That prone cobra where you are pulling those arms back and activating those trapezius muscles. So we're going to do a iso prone cobra, just because the iso version's a little bit different than the one that we have up here. Now, some other core exercises that might be pretty relevant here, if we go down to the core, we've got the side iso abs, right, which will obviously allow you to kind of contract and, you know, push maybe into, push yourself up into like a neutral alignment. Even a prone iso abs allows you to kind of push away and you can activate like those serratus muscles. But one of the best ones here is going to be that quadruped opposite arm, opposite leg raise, AKA the bird dog. Because if you're going here, you can actively focus on using those deltoid muscles as you are raising your arm up overhead. So that's going to be probably our keyest exercise here for core work. So the quadruped, opposite arm, opposite leg raise. Longest name for an exercise in the world. That's why they call it the bird dog. Then we have got our balance exercise. Again, the single leg lift and chop right here, right, is going to be incredibly relevant because you can use that posterior deltoid to help you, you know, as you are reaching those arms. So single leg lift and chop. And lastly, our plyometrics, not super relevant to our upper body again, right? So we would maybe go with something like, let's just kind of use this as a follow. What do we pick? Sagittal? Yeah, we'll do cone jump frontal. Right, so 3 sets of everything. Let's go with 30 seconds, 10 each, 10 each, and 8 there. Isometric, slow, slow, 5-second hold on land. Cool. And there we go. That's a very simple but not ineffective. Whoa. There we go. Warm up and movement prep for clients who have like those postural distortions that we kind of expect to see, right? Arms falling forward, you know, basically you're looking at tight pecs and tight lats at its most basic, with the upper traps being somewhat relevant there. And with like a client who has like the forward head posture, we're gonna see a lot of like neck dysfunction. These are a little bit different than like, you know, this is stuff that you often will address more in your resistance section. Like obviously if your resistance section is going to involve like a lot of rowing motions, right, where you are focusing on that scapular retraction. And one of the things you're going to tell your client that is just relevant the entire time, if they have that forward head posture, they should be tucking their chin every exercise they got. If they're doing a seated row, tuck their chin. They're doing a bench press, tuck their chin. One of the easiest ways you guys can apply this is just as you get on that bench, lift your head up, tuck the chin, and then lay it back down. Instead of like, and your client should, like one of the ways that I tell my clients that they should check for this, if you notice that whenever you're laying down, you are looking behind you, your head is in a tilted position like this, okay? You wanna tuck the chin so that you are looking straight up towards the ceiling. Your eyes should be drawing a 90-degree angle straight up. All right, do you guys have any questions? Any questions for today's lesson?
No, sir.
All right, guys. So look for homework, look for the final piece of homework number 4 today. We'll get that up on Canvas in just a little bit, and that's about all I got for you.
Cool. Thank you.
Speaking of forward head posture, I should not do that. All right, guys.
Okay, bye.
See you tomorrow.